make co-host. Hey. Hey. Oh, I like the shirt.
How you guys doing today?
Fine. How y'all?
I'm well. We're well. Charlotte's not going to be able to make it because she has some other events. We have a pride event going on at the club today. So
Okay. Well, I hope you do share about that, the event, you know?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. That's what's up. Okay, Dr. Winfield, are you able to do your video?
Hey, how's it going?
Hi, how you doing?
Doing good. Happy Pride, everybody.
Yes, happy Pride. Okay. So to anyone who has started watching, I'm very sorry that a sister got a little delay getting started, and then coincidentally there was some recent technical changes in the way that Facebook and Zoom talk to each other, and it's really an improvement, but it just slowed me down a little bit more. That being said, let's carry on. All right, so this month is Pride Month, and in recognition of Pride Month, my Culture and Diversity Initiative is hosting this month's roundtable talk with some amazing old friends of mine, and I hope a new friend of mine, Miss Tia. And so just for those who may not be familiar, I started as Madam Vice President of the East Baton Rouge Parish School Board. I started a culture and diversity reader for this year. Every month is a different focus. And so then obviously February was in recognition of Black History Month, Women's History was March. April changed it up a little bit and did some dynamics of classism in America. And then also added the Arab community because later on, I added the Arab community because that's in April. And then in May, we had Jewish heritage, and, you know, being on the school board, I had to recognize it was Teachers Appreciation Month, but then I added Asian American and Pacific Islanders book suggestions. And so it's each month around the focus area. It's an initiative to explore the interweaving of our collective culture and gain a greater appreciation of ourselves. Each month offers several selections. Try one or try them all. Add them to your circulation in an existing book club, grab tea or coffee and chat about them with a close friend, or reflect on your own. If you want to see the whole recommendation list, you can go to my website, www.dawnchanet.Collins, that's DawnChanettCollins.com/Madam VP. And it will pull up this list as well as the supplemental list where I added for April and May. There's so much diversity in this country to explore and learn from. And so I'm glad to do this. Just to let you know, for this month, the reading recommendations were A Burst of Light and Other Essays by Audre Lorde, and I have enjoyed every page of it. Abandon Me, Memoirs by Melissa Febos. How Beautiful the Ordinary, 12 Stories of Identity, edited by Michael Cart, and Redefining Realness, My Path to Womanhood, Identity, Love, and So Much More by Janet Mock. Okay, and I will be doing a deeper dive with the Audre Lorde book. I do a deeper dive with one selection from each book. It's spontaneous whenever a sister has time, because a sister does have a busy schedule, but this is important to me. And so I like to highlight different stuff from the books each month. And so I'll do a deeper dive sometime next week. You just got to pay attention to my live feed and see when a sister hops on and be ready for it. Okay, so I want to just thank all of my guests who are with me today. I have Tia Provo representing for herself and her partner, Charlotte Provo, and she'll get a chance to say why Charlotte was not able to join us today. It's a great event that's going on that they're getting ready for. And Tia is an LGBT advocate and mental health counselor. Dylan Waguespack is organized with Louisiana Trans Advocates and organized with so many more organizations. Glad to be a great friend of Dylan and for Dylan to be a great friend of mine, as well as Paul, Dr. Paul T. Winfield, owner of More and More I Am Yoga Studio. Thank you all so much for joining me today. And what I'm gonna do is turn it over to you all and let you introduce yourself, say a little bit about your background, recognizing that you'll have time to share a larger story in other parts of today's roundtable. So if you could just introduce yourself, say a little bit about who you are, about 2 minutes each, so we don't eat up our time. Tia?
I guess we place, I'll go ahead and take the honor of going first. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tia Provo. As previously stated, I'm an LGBT advocate as well as a mental health counselor. I also serve as a co-chair for our Get Loud Louisiana, which is ending the epidemic against HIV and AIDS. And I'm just honored to be here to give some insight and opinions on what it means to be queer in East Baton Rouge Parish. And also more so to be able to be a part with you, because you're the councilwoman for the district in which my children go to school in. So it's definitely an honor to be and see representation.
Absolutely. I'm very glad to have you as my constituent. I didn't know. Thank you, Paul, for introducing me to Tia. And that you're an advocate like myself is so amazing. And Dylan, I'll just go alphabetical order. Dylan.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Dylan Waguespack. I use he, him, or they, them pronouns. I'm excited to be here today. As Madam Vice President shared, I organize with Louisiana Trans Advocates, which is a statewide transgender advocacy organization. We focus a lot on state level legislation at the Capitol, but also do a lot of social support programming across the state. We have 8 groups that meet every month in Shreveport, Monroe, Jefferson Parish, all across. Baton Rouge, of course, is one of those chapters. And then in my day job, I'm the Public Policy and External Affairs Director at True Colors United, which is a national nonprofit that was founded by Cindy Lauper to end LGBTQ youth homelessness. So sort of a mix of things going on there. I'm from New Orleans, but Baton Rouge became home when I was 18. And now I sort of split time between Baton Rouge and Washington, D.C. And thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you. All right, Dr. Winfield.
Hi, Don. Thank you for inviting me, Madam Vice President, to participate in this conversation. So I'm from Baton Rouge originally, and my doctor is in international development from Tulane. But my dissertation was a federal policy analysis on HIV/AIDS. And Baton Rouge was like one of the 3 core cities that I really looked at. So we can always sidebar into that lane if you like. But I'm also a project manager that supports small disadvantaged businesses and an owner of a yoga studio. So yeah, I'm happy to be here because as Tia was saying earlier, representation matters. And yeah, the LGBT community is throughout all of Baton Rouge. So we should always be in consideration.
Absolutely. So thank you all for sharing a little bit about yourself. I could have asked for a bio and all of that stuff, but I think y'all, it's always better for somebody to say who they are for themselves, I feel like, And so I already did an overview of the Culture and Diversity Initiative. So then, Dylan, I'm putting you on the spot, probably, but do you feel comfortable? And anybody who wants to chime in, I just know Dylan. Oh no, did Dylan drop?
I'm here. Sorry, I lost my my audio for a second. So can you repeat the question? I apologize.
Okay. So forgive me if I'm putting you on the spot. But do you mind just giving an overview of the LGBT movement in the US? Not extensive, because I know I'm putting you on the spot.
Sure.
But
yeah.
Anybody else that want to chime in, it's just that I have a long history with Dylan in the advocacy space. So I know I can put him on the spot like that.
Yeah, I'm happy to give a little bit of an overview. Yeah, I think
Okay.
the thing to know if you're really if you're tuning in right now and this is a early conversation for you about what the LGBTQ equality movement looks like, is that it's a very diverse movement. We focus on all kinds of issues, right? So they say that like no one leads like a single issue life, and that's true for LGBTQ people as well. And so it looks like all kinds of things. We've got folks working on jobs and employment discrimination, on housing and homelessness, right? On anti-violence prevention, HIV/AIDS, right? All of these different areas where we see like disparate outcomes for LGBTQ people. All of those things are part of this movement. And so that's actually one of the really cool things about what it looks like to get involved, is that if you're sort of an ally to the LGBTQ community, or you're an LGBTQ person who's trying to like plug into this work, there are so many options out there for how to do that, and so many different issues that you can work on. I would say right now, the really big thing that folks probably have heard about on the national level is the Equality Act. And that's a piece of federal legislation that, if it were to pass the Senate, would in essence extend the Civil Rights Act to include protections from discrimination for LGBTQ people in employment, in housing, in education, in public accommodations, in credit and finance, in jury selection, right? So there are all these areas of law where we don't have any sort of statutory protections from discrimination, and it's legal, or it can be argued that it's legal for somebody to in Louisiana say, I'm going to evict you from this house because I found out that you're gay, or because I found out that you're transgender. And so that's the bill that hopes to stop all of that, or at least give people a chance to do something about it if it happens to them.
Okay, thank you. And then do you happen to recall, either one of y'all, in the US, well, I know the Stonewall riot was a big
Yeah, in 1964, that's ultimately what kicked off why we celebrate Pride today, which is so dear to Charlotte and my heart, on why we were able to have Cedarcrest Bar by Provo, to have a safe space where we can all come and commune. And it's way more than just entertainment. There is a lot of intersections that goes on with having a public sector, such as Dylan was speaking on homelessness for the youth, people of color, queer children. We have a center off of Swan Avenue, as well as Skyland Avenue. It's called Out the Box. It is a LGBTQ resource center directed by Javar Payne. I'm also one of his HIV counselors there. There are a lot of resources that we are trying to gather. It's important that we as queer people have allies that are interested in knowing what our struggles are, because a lot of times it's overlooked. He spoke on the Equality Act. You have no idea what that means to me as a queer mother. That means that last year I had an experience where I went, prior to COVID, that I went to enroll my daughter in a private school. Now, it was a Christian private school. When it came time for my partner to come in, we were then denied because it was a Christian school and it didn't look good for two women to be there. So things like the Equality Act is something that has to be passed. People always wonder what it looks like, but they don't never really take into the step of what it feels on a day-to-day, the struggles that we have. To be amongst a population that is marginalized on different levels, to be a woman of color, to be queer, to at one point in time be a single mother. Those things, all those stressors at the same time, is the reason why I advocate so hard for everything, for every room that I can step in where my sisters and my brothers can't be. I make sure that my voice is loud, and I can't say enough for the work that you, Dylan, Dr. Paul, everybody that wants to use their platform to make sure that we're heard and to pass more information so that we can reduce the stigma and get our voices heard in the correct avenues.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's it. Dr. Winfield, did you want to chime in, or Paul, did you want to chime in on that, on the historical perspective and the overall perspective, or?
Yeah, I would just say that particularly activists can be very focused on the now moment, and so it's, for me, it's always very exciting to hear people like Dylan or Tia speak, because they're eager to get you to, okay, this is what we need to do. Let's make some change happen. Let's go at it. We got this law. Let's get it passed. Let's move. But which is fantastic, and we need so much more of that energy, because really and truly, the LGBT movement is like 50 years old. There have been gay people forever, thousands of years documented gay relationships, lesbian relationships, different parenting structures, different gender identities, and particularly in original ancient societies. So throughout a lot of Native American cultures, throughout a lot of African cultures, throughout a lot of Middle Eastern cultures, there is this place. And there's actually even a place in traditional, old, ancient European society. But somewhere along the way, like 15, 16, 1700s, things started to shift and repression occurred. And so people had to start bottling up and hiding who they actually were, just for safety and security. Well, fast forward to the 60s, you're having revolutions against war, you're having revolutions for racial civil rights and gender equality. And then, of course, we get back to police brutality on the gay, lesbian, trans community. And our side was like, yeah, we've had enough too. And so in this last 50 years, there's been more and more push of recognizing the need for us to take space, have representation, and to be included at the table for discussion. Because so oftentimes, and if you're in any marginalized community, you know, if you're not at the table, you're not actually being considered when decisions are being made. And that lack of consideration can have more negative impacts than if they're actually trying to hurt you. So that's my little tie-in.
Oh, no, that's powerful. Very powerful statement. Okay, so now if we could dig, if you all could, but you know what, too, let me, before I go to the next thing with more personal insight, how much of your personal story you would like to share, etc. Some of my viewers really may not understand some basics, like what is LGBTQ? When we say that, what is, and I'm an ally. I try my best to be a strong ally, but I acknowledge that I still have a whole lot to learn. Like I personally struggle with what queer means, because sometimes I'll ask people in the LGBT community, LGBTQ plus community, okay, what's queer? And as a matter of fact, there's a homegirl of mine who considers herself queer, and I need to ask her how she defined. I get different answers.
Can I chime in on that, because I use this often. I'm so against labels. I don't like to be put in a box because I'm more. So I use the term queer to identify that I love who I love. I am a lesbian by title, if somebody wants to get technical about it, but I prefer the word queer because I don't like to be sexualized, or my sexual identity to be that it just has to be that. You asked what the Q was for, is for questioning.
Okay.
To my understanding. It's one of those things to that as we get more of a platform to be able to speak and be out and be proud about it. The rules, I'll say the rules are being made up as it goes, but you know, it's one of those things We all learned at the same time. As Paul mentioned, for 50 years, it has been LGBT. And then over years of development, we added the Q, and now we have the plus. So it's learning about how to be inclusive. It's about being inclusive.
Which is especially for underrepresented people fighting. I mean, that's a common thing. I mean, just look at the African American, Negro, colored, Black community. You know, some of that was the definitions we got from other people. And then when we got power to say, hey, this is how I want to be defined, there was still some struggle. And so, and even today, you know, African American, Black is pretty much simultaneously used, interchangeably used, excuse me. So definitely, and thank you, Tia, for sharing with me how you use queer as a term, and then lifting up that the Q is the questioning. Did anybody else want to chime in on any of that before we move on to the next part?
Sure. Go ahead, Dr. Paul.
Just to jump in briefly, especially in the LGBTQ plus community, we have to have space for questioning. We have to have space for queer. We have to have space for intersex. We have to have space for these more fluid, more open, less limiting titles, because again, for thousands of years, you have people that are able to express themselves freely. And then for, let's say 500 years, you can't. And so there is like a loss of culture, a loss of connection. And so now, you know, you're born into a society, and depending on when you were born, it was either totally not acceptable, kind of sort of acceptable. Maybe it's okay to be gay, but trans is just too much. You know, like
even
depending on
LGBT,
what little subgroup, you know, what community, and what community you're raised in, and are you in EBR, and what part of EBR are you in? And you know, like what are your religious connections? What are your school connections? Because depending on where you are in all of these spaces, you're still going to need to find yourself in a box for your own security. Yes. And for your own safety and for your own peace. And so we have to we amongst ourselves are like, okay, well, we have to have space for those people who are still fighting through the socialization to find their path, to find their identity, to find their truth. Because so much of our life history, until we get clear, is just this nagging sense of something isn't right, or something is out of kilter, or I know I feel like this, but I look like that. People expect me to do this, but it still feels like I'm not in my space. And so because of that, we really need the space to have space.
And that Q, and Dylan wanted to go, and then I see you touched a spark in Tia, so I feel it in Tia. But that questioning piece, I think, is so important from my perspective, right? Like, because sometimes I've observed some people struggle with, okay, they labeled themselves as gay, but then they still attracted to women, and then it's like, well, are you bi or are you gay? You know, I've watched that kind of struggle, and maybe going through that whole questioning and being okay to say, I'm questioning and I'm exploring, you know, are you paying, or are you, you know, whatever, you know? So yeah, so transitioning on over to Dylan, who had something to say, and then Tia.
Yeah, I think, you know, there are some people who are going to fit really neatly maybe into like a specific identity label, but there's some people for like the pressure of that is unhealthy. So I thought the analogy you brought up of like the language evolution around Black identity is actually a really good one for allies to sort of use to frame this, because I know for myself, like early on in like my own journey of like learning anti-racist principles, like I got caught up in like, okay, but like I hear Black, I hear African American, right? I think growing up, I was taught that like saying Black was disrespectful. And so you're supposed to say African American, right? And then at some point I had to just say, you know what, like it is not on me to like, it's not my business to like understand every little nuance of Black identity. It's just me, like it's on me to call people what they want to be called and to be respectful, right? And so there's, you know, I think it comes from a really good place with allies where like people don't want to be offensive, people want to understand, right? Like they want to be there for folks in this community. But really like you can just jump in with us here, and as long as you show up in a way that is respectful and that you know, and you refer to people the way that they refer to themselves, that's going to be, you know, seen by us. Like nobody's looking to like have like a gotcha moment, like you use the wrong language. Like we can tell as like queer and trans people, like we can tell if somebody is coming with good intentions or not.
Thank you for that. And Tia, I see you just bursting at the seams.
Oh, it's so many great and honest points that it definitely does me some good to hear that my thought process is similar to those around me. Dr. Paul made a reference into the upbringing of people and what's accepted. So a little back history about me. I'm from Sacramento, California. I've been living here in Baton Rouge for a little over 10 years. I grew up in a very diverse culturally background. My mother is half Puerto Rican. My grandmother on my father's side, he's Haitian. So there is a lot of things culturally that having a cultural background and then living in California where everything is really open. There wasn't any, I guess, wasn't really stigma growing up. I had aunts and uncles that were out. So that lifestyle was common to me. I didn't know what it meant to be fearful or shameful of who I love or how I love or what I wear, what I say, how I speak. So that was I guess you would call some type of barrier when I moved here, because the way that I express myself, people in the South was like, that's disrespectful, or we're going to sweep that underneath the rug. We don't talk about that out loud, or we don't say those type of things in public. And I'm here, I'm like, why not? We have to talk about it, because if we don't talk about it, then how we going to know about it? You know, right. So my mind frame geared towards that, to encourage everyone that I meet, no matter how you identify yourself, to be loud and proud on whoever you are. Take accountability for yourself and just be. Now, if you're not, though, if you're more on a conservative type, then that's fine too. But I don't believe in people being boxed in because of fear of or not wanting to disrespect someone else's point of view about you. That doesn't make sense to me. So yeah. Hi, y'all. I'm Tia.
Now, look, why don't you go ahead and transition, because you touched on your background and upbringing. And so then personal insight, sharing about what it means to be considered part of the LGBTQ plus community. Did you want to elaborate a little bit more? Sounds like you just always in the, okay, go ahead.
What it means to be considered in the LGBTQ plus community, to me, again, it just means representation. I fall into a lot of different sectors, a lot of different things that I represent, and I'm afforded the ability to be in a lot of different rooms where my voice does matter. So the fact that I have this passion and this fire, I listen to my community. I take in the things to where they may not be able to articulate themselves in the correct way to get their voice or their message heard. So I take that in, and anywhere that I can stand and someone's going to listen, I will figure out a way to formulate some type of expression to where they're going to say, well, let me go back and check with Tia about this, because she said something that I need to know more about. Advocating to me looks like every day interchanging wisdom and knowledge. That somebody's going to tell me something that's going to give me the next step that I need to get to my bigger goal. And ultimately that is to have housing for the youth that have run away because of their sexual identity. It is to have mental health services available to those in our neighborhood. It is to be able to speak to the women that don't know anything about sexual health and making sure that their, that their woman stuff is okay just because they're not having sex with men. It's about education and informing to me. And though I may not always look to what, the government wants to see, my voice is still, it still matters, because at the end of the day, the people that need the service is not the ones who look like you, on the everyday, on the 9-to-5 job. These people have, us as people have a lot of struggles that we go through. I told you earlier that I work also for Capital Area Reentry Program as well as Out the Box LGBTQ Center. It is a
Capital Area, which one?
Capital Area Reentry Program.
Okay. Okay.
So we have a second friend service program. We do HIV testing and counseling. And then the second portion of that is the LGBTQ Center Out the Box, where we offer services as resume writing, job placement, housing, all type of services that we're trying to give to the community that that do look like us. And then we're able to go and step into those other spaces and say, okay, in the last 3 months, we had X amount of people come in for these type of services.
Mm-hmm.
We need more funding, or we need more ways that we can reach more services for them. So the work that we're doing, we're taking numbers, we're collecting data, and we're submitting it so that way that we can be more valuable to the actual people that's in the community. I don't know how else to put that, but yeah.
Okay, no, thank you. And I apologize for interrupting you. I contract with Capital Area Human Services. And so it broke up a little bit on my side. So I was like, wait, hold up, me and her, in the same space. And to some extent, yeah. But yeah, I apologize for interrupting you. All right, who else would like to share, more personal perspective? Dylan? Paul?
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
I've been thinking about this question a lot lately because, not in the context of necessarily my own experience, although we can get into that, but in the context of like what I want young people to understand about what it means to be a part of this community. We saw this year at the Louisiana state legislature, there was a huge wave of anti-trans bills that really all targeted youth, right? Children and youth. And so like, as we sort of moved through that session and did advocacy to try and stop those bills from becoming laws, one of the things that we were thinking about at all times is, what do we want to be telling young people right now to help them feel safer, right? Or to help them feel secure in this really, in this time where like this is really harming them. And so I think like, where I landed is that, I wanted young trans people to understand that they're, that they are loved as a member of this community, that they are part of a family that can't wait to meet them, and that, they're part of a legacy of fighting for freedom, and that's what it means to be part of this community. I think that's not how necessarily everybody in this community shows up. And I think there are different roles that people play. But that's one of them. And I think it can be helpful for us to just make sure that message is heard by young people who very specifically don't feel included, right? To know that there's a space for them sort of amongst these folks who are doing this work. And then, for myself, I think like when I look back at my own personal history, that really sort of rings true for me, because that's how I found social support. And that's how I found like my chosen family was through activism as an LGBTQ person. And so of course, Madam Vice Chair, that because we go way back at this point, but by the time I was 19, I was homeless. I was homeless in New Orleans. I was living at Covenant House. I ended up in Baton Rouge shortly after that and got plugged into the local LGBTQ activism. And that's really how I came into my own identity and came into my own understanding of who I am, was sort of through that that sort of work in solidarity with a lot of other members of this community, and was able to like channel those experiences, that lived experience, into solutions that sort of go beyond myself. So that's how I like to encourage especially our younger folks to think about what it means to be part of this community. And as you grow up and as you get to be an older member of this community, it means turning around and making those opportunities available to as many people as you can. And that's really where I am at this point, is trying to like look behind my shoulder and make sure that those doors that I helped kick open stay open.
Thank you for sharing, Dylan. And you may have shared with me that you were homeless at one point, but I don't think I knew that. If I remember correctly, I met you relatively early on in your transition. Okay.
Yeah, you would have met me like the year after that, probably.
All right. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm glad you're not going back and forth from Baton Rouge to DC, and almost that Tyler Perry experience, from homeless to Hollywood. Thank you for sharing, Dr. Paul.
Yeah, I think when I think about like my personal experience, and this community, I really think about like information, awareness, and like connectivity. And so like I came of age in the 90s, and I grew up religious, but like Louisiana conservative, meaning not really all that conservative, but like we dressed up to go to church. Like there was never, for me, one of the hardest things about wrapping my head around the fact that I was gay was I really didn't know that gay existed growing up. Like it wasn't like taboo. It wasn't a sin. It wasn't evil. It was invisible. Like it just didn't occur. And so I didn't even think it was a thing to be. Like it wasn't like, it was just like a point of confusion for me, because I was like, I know I seem like a normal person, but like I'm not having really normal thoughts. And I don't see anywhere anybody who seems to be thinking the way I'm thinking. And so fast forward to 2014, 2015, I'm doing my PhD dissertation. And a part of the dis was I actually surveyed, the dissertation was a federal policy analysis on HIV/AIDS policy, specifically for Black men who have sex with men. Okay. And so a part of the project was I surveyed all of these Black gay men at bars and restaurants and all over, right? Mm-hmm. Well, one of the results that I came up with, and since I've also looked at other studies, and Kaiser has found the same thing, everybody's found the same thing. Mm-hmm. Well, at that time, one of the biggest challenges in the African-American MSM or gay community was that they did not know PrEP existed. So, and this is 2015. So I knew about PrEP literally 15 years earlier, and I was mad about it 15 years earlier.
Do you mind explaining what it is for those that might be watching?
Sure. Okay. Sure. I was mad 15 years earlier because PrEP existed in Australia. PrEP existed in other countries outside of the United States. But how did I know? Well, in traveling, I would see advertisements, and in other places, oh my gosh, They were so much more advanced. They had like cartoons that were very, very, very sexually graphic. And but they would give you the message that you could be in a situation today that can change your life. Do you want to go into this situation prepared or not prepared? And if you go unprepared, you're have PrEP. And PrEP is a once a day pill that you could take, which basically prevents you from getting HIV. It's not 100%, but it's like 99.98. It's really, really good. But it was not approved yet in the United States way, way, way back then. But it had been approved a good solid 10 years by the time I was doing the survey. And we knew when I was doing this survey that PrEP was like 98+% effective. And 95% of the Black men who I surveyed had not heard of PrEP. They all were willing to take it if there was some pill that you could take to keep you from getting HIV, 100% willing to take it. 98% did not know it existed. And it had been around for a decade. Man. And so like today, when I look at the news or when I look at television, I am grateful because I see like commercials for Biktarvy, I see commercials for PrEP, I see commercials for HIV treatments, I see trans people in commercials, I see Black people in commercials. So there is more of an effort, but we really have to do more about intentionally communicating to these communities that are underrepresented and underserved. Because, I mean, it's the same thing that we really saw with COVID, where if we get a treatment and it works, the most effective use of the treatment is to target the treatment to the people that are like dying from it. And after we get the people that are dying to stop dying, then we can expand the circle and bring more people into safety. But those populations that are really hardest hit, they are having a dramatic effect on national statistics. So help those that really need the help. And so just making sure, to wrap all of this up, just making sure that we are trying to always have somebody at the table so that we can always have a tie to that community.
Thank you. And if you don't mind me asking a real quick question on the PrEP, your dissertation focused on African-American gay men?
Yes.
Did you happen to run across any research or come into any knowledge about whether that dynamic was the same, the lack of knowledge of the PrEP in other demographics like white gay men or what have you?
Yeah, so basically other studies found like it was a disparity of like at that point 30 to 40% in knowledge gap, depending on what other racial groups you compared. But it was also, and I found a lot of like reasons for that. Like I did a national survey and then I did localized surveys in Baton Rouge, DC, and in New Orleans. And like even locally at that time, there were like weekly magazines or weekly newsletters or newspapers that were prevalent in the gay community, but they were even like segregated and stratified. So yes, the federal government was putting massive money into nonprofit organizations, and they were putting out a lot of information awareness campaigns in local mags about PrEP. But Black people weren't reading those local mags. So they were reaching the gay market, but they weren't reaching the Black gay market. But the Black gay market represented like 60% of new HIV cases.
Okay,
and so it's like it's like you really have to get very specific, And that's why I say you have to be intentional about it. Like, it can't just be like an idea, oh, I want to make sure like gay people are involved. No, you've got to be very intentional, because a lot of our communities are hidden, but they're hidden for security. Because especially when you're talking about younger people, they want to survive. They don't want to be thrown out of their house. They don't want to be beat up. They don't want to be targeted. And if you're talking about older people, they don't want to lose their job. They don't want to lose their apartment. They still got, bills to pay, and they need a way to get around. And so because of all of that societal stigma that is still very real, a lot of the community is hidden, but that doesn't mean that they are not real. They're just not seen. But I guarantee you, they still fucking.
Yeah, right. And
it's going to, pardon my language,
but you're right. You're right. That's the reality.
It's still going to get around, because this is a community. And you could consider yourself outside the community or not, but keep living. It'll get to you.
So you did your dissertation in 2013, 2014. So currently what I'm doing now is I'm doing study participants, how people coming out of the prison system with COVID as well as HIV testing. So I do have some stats from 2018. In 2018, we had 177 new HIV cases in East Baton Rouge Parish. Up at 177, 86.9% were African-American men, gay men. So while overall on a state and parish, our numbers are declining for the collective, but the Black men are still at a higher rate of transmission because of our own personal stigma that we have going on and lack of knowledge. But I am happy to say that there are more initiatives going out, like the You Equal You campaign that does speak heavily on PrEP. PrEP itself, things like this needs to be made known to our medical providers. Because when I come in as a woman, they don't really ask me they'll ask you about your generic, sexual history and all that stuff, but they don't never take into effect about, okay, well, is this queer woman having sex with gay men or other men who have sex with men? Is she at a higher transmission rate? Is this trans woman, what type of partners do they have? People don't take into real account on how small our gay bubble is in East Baton Rouge Parish, and how quick and easy that if we did a map of who was connected to who, and I know this for a fact that it is what I would consider a cesspool on. If I did a map, Paul, you know how easily everything connects. And just as easy it is for us to have sex and to talk about all these other things, it's just important that we keep pushing out the message for keep yourself protected. And by doing that, it's more than using condoms. It is being informative about different areas of care, such as PrEP. And it's also having open and honest communication with your partner about your sexual experiences, your sexual expectations, and your sexual past too, because that's your health. So thank you. There I go cutting people off again. I keep doing it. I'm so sorry.
Oh, you did good. You had your hand up there. You did. Dr. Paul, did you have something else to say? Or you good? You good? All right.
I already gave my sermon. I'm gonna get off my high horse.
Okay, so then dealing with all the isms, and whatever order you would like to go in, or whether or not you have any response. I'm somebody that is big on the power of association and connecting dots and recognizing intersectionality, overlaps, or what have you. And so, and I'll open up with a thought. In turn, as I ask you the question about dealing with all the isms, where, how does one manage the different spaces that they live in regarding race, gender, sex, and class? And I'm gonna just be honest. As a cis Black female, I struggle. I have to put some emotions in check sometimes, because, for example, you know, I'm political. And so then I'm noticing some stuff behind the scenes with Black men feeling attacked, which they are. Okay, but then some Black men's response is attack the Black women. I'm like, why we all Black? Can we all just get along? You know, why you gotta poo-poo on me? Can we work inside? Can we walk side by side, arm in arm? and you know, and that old, you know, and sometimes I have to, you know, that sentiment that Malcolm X shared once about, you know, the Black woman being the least protected, the least respected, you know, but then also recognizing everybody, you know, other folks have needs, you know, so then recognizing my own needs, but then not sacrificing myself on the altar of right, you know, like how do we, you know, I admit I personally struggle, and I pray I do a good job of putting my emotional response in check, but and work towards the best. That is always my goal, and I have no problem with being called out if I fail to reach or work toward that goal. I mean, you know, but one very real moment that I had was that year where the right to marriage for gay marriage, and I was glad the U.S. Supreme Court decided to let everybody marry whoever they want to marry. Like, I mean, I need to give a shout out to my uncle who liked the live feed. I hope you watching. I love my uncle, and I want him to marry he ain't married yet. But if he find him somebody he want to marry, I will be at the wedding, okay, and say a few words if he want me to. But that very same day, I struggled because that's when they suspended, for lack of a better word, sections 2 and 5 of the Voting Rights Act. And so I was like, oh, you know, like give a win and take a huge, you know, like it almost felt like people being pit against each other almost, you know, like why couldn't it be a win for both? And so so the isms and the walk in between, you know, again, I believe in being in solidarity with Black brothers, but then sometimes that's stuff that is specific to women. Like literally during my mother's lifetime, women could not apply for credit on their own, period. Like not 100 years ago, 200 years ago, you know. And so then I had to be in solidarity with all folks that check the box female on the with different situations, pay equity, et cetera, et cetera. And so then if y'all could share, you know, if you would like to walk in the different spaces that you walk in. Go ahead, T. You've been waiting.
Look, you know, I'm coming. To be a part of a community in which you serve, all right, I am of the community that I serve directly. So I struggle too with the emotional boundaries of my emotional responses versus the overall goal. I've heard before, and sometimes that my passion, it can be taken as aggression, and my message is lost because I'm so passionate or I'm so quick to respond because it's something that I care deeply about. And it goes on to a bunch of different things. So dealing with classism, it depends on where I am, because as a Black woman, I'm always on anything that has to do with such social injustice. It doesn't matter on where it falls. But when you get to those different intersections, like I said, I'm always feel like I'm torn apart, because for everything that I represent, there is something attacking it. And my foot is on one door on this end, and I have to look at the room that I'm in to make sure that I present myself so that my message can be heard and it's not overlooked. And then I'm in this room and I have to change the way that I speak. Don't change the way that I think, but change the way that I speak so that I can get to this audience. Ultimately dealing with it, I kind of being cocky with myself, knowing like, okay, How someone else views me is not going to take away from my mission and what I'm working for. If a door closes, or if someone's going to try to demean or make me feel inferior to, there's no such thing. Such thing, so I'm like, I'm always on a good fight. I feel like I am a better ally than I am for you to be an opponent of mine, because either way it goes, there isn't any stopping or stepping. If I have something on me and if it's pulling for what I believe in and what I stand for, I'm going at it, you can try to. And I'll be real childish, brick wall, waterfall, but good evening, how you doing? How your mama and them? You need some, still meet with grace when, what Michelle Obama said, when they hit low, we still go high. So that's how I deal with classisms and all the other isms. Just to be truthful, remember why and what I'm doing it for, and have to talk with myself about my emotional responses. I have to take a moment sometimes and breathe.
Yes. But I mean, even I jotted down that whole thing about passion and how your passion is perceived. But isn't that a typical response to Black women's passion? Like we full throttle, baby, it's coming out.
Yes.
As a culture, as a subculture, excuse me, we, it was not instilled in us, well, depending on what class, to your point, right? But for the most part, it wasn't instilled in us that we had to be reserved and prim and proper. It's like, I own my feelings. That's what I said. Yes, that's what I said. You need me to repeat it. And then sometimes people perceive that as aggression and as anger. And we get labeled with the Black angry woman thing often. And sometimes, a lot of time, I mean, sometimes, yes, it is Black female anger, and it's very justified. But a lot of times it has nothing to do with anger. It's just, I'm not in a box with my emotions, but I when you said that, I said, well, that's typical. Look, you queer and I'm cis, and we had that same struggle, right? All right. Would anybody else want to share that thought? A thought on the isms?
Sure. I mean, I could say that, like, one of the things that I have to deal with all the time is like anti-trans sentiments inside of the like LGB community, right? So like cisgender individuals who are gay or queer or bisexual, and like don't stay in solidarity with like trans people, right? Like see us as like separate from their struggle. And I think like something that is really hard about that for me is that let me shut this door because I feel like there's a lot of background noise. Is that for like most of the past decade, like the LGBTQ really broadly like activist movement in Louisiana has been led by trans people, right? So we're out here like fighting for like marriage and all, like all these protections based on sexual orientation and all these other things. And that's not like necessarily always reciprocated. It is a lot of the time, but there's this like, there's like a huge amount of overlap there. But then there's also some folks sort of over here on the side who don't feel sort of a need to reciprocate that solidarity, and so that can be really frustrating to feel like you're working for people who are not like willing to sort of return that effort, or don't see your struggle as connected to theirs. And I think that like the other thing that I come across a lot in like inside of like white LGBTQ spaces as well is this like total misconception about like homophobia in the Black community. And so I'm just going to name that because we hear all the time like, oh, like Black leaders are more likely to be homophobic, or like Black culture is homophobic, right? And it's like literally in Louisiana, the only people we can count on are Black leaders on these issues. That is it. There is not a single white elected official in the state of Louisiana who I'm like 100% of the time they're going to be with us, right? I can't name one. All of them are Black elected officials, right? So like, there's all of these different like just. I think somebody said earlier, like the phrase, like feeling like, I think it was you, Madam Vice President, like feeling like we're being pitted against each other. Like that feels constant. Like there's always this stuff out here where it's like, it just feels like very clearly like an effort to divide us, because we are so much stronger when we're working together on these things.
Yeah.
Wow,
Good.
Dylan.
Mhm.
That's a really valid point on, even within the LGBTQ plus community, it's separate. On Wednesday, Charlotte and 3 others were given a Metro Council award for LGBT services to the community. But the week prior to, it was declared LGBTQ Day by the mayor to the predominant white organizations for LGBTQ. And so that was just one of those things to me that when I talk about representation that I seen, I was like, it's sad to say that it's always seems like it's pitted against each other. Now, it may have been something that was just like a mistake or wasn't, but we were not included. The Black organizations were not included, were not thought of when that transmission went on. So that's one of those things to where when Dylan said about the divide within the community, it's real. We all stand and fight the same fight because we're all being mistreated the same. We all getting the same mistreatment. However, there isn't a lot of solidarity when it comes to joining the racial forces on the LGBTQ plus community. So I definitely can identify with you on that one, Dylan. That was a really great point.
Yeah, in thinking about all of this, I guess it's funny to me because I'm supposedly the yogi at the table. So I'm supposed to have one way of responding to the isms, but my my gut reaction is this thought, and it usually comes up like around birthdays, like big birthdays, 0 birthdays. And so it definitely, I feel like in my experience, it started around 30s. And so when your friends started turning 30s, they would be like, oh, you got to watch out. I really am not going to have patience for a lot of BS because I'm 30 and I don't care about what other people think about me. I'm going to wear what I want to wear. 40, even less. 50, even less. And so what I realized is stop worrying about what they think now, and you just have to do what you need to do because, obviously outside of like actively hurting other people, but if it's just you expressing yourself or you wearing what you want to wear or you advocating for a cause, just do it. Because just like there are people that are going to look at you and hit you with the isms, there are going to be people that look at you that you can't see because they're invisible, but they're seeing you and they're getting inspired and they're getting motivated and they're getting clarity to where do they fit in the world and where do they fit in the space. But I also want to balance the I don't give a what energy with also self-preservation and taking care of yourself. And so if that means you need to meditate or practice yoga, meditate or practice yoga. If that means you need to skip a party and not be social tonight because your anxiety is already on 10, sit your butt out and chill, but like listening to yourself, doing 100%, 110% of what you want to do the way you want to do it, but also having that balance to know sometimes you have to pull it in and just relax to take care of yourself.
Yeah, advocacy burnout is so real, period. Yeah. And myself at the tender age of 45, I am learning self-care, especially when for advocates, we worry about everybody else. And so then the need for self-care and restoration is even much more important. Because if for no other reason than to keep doing what you love, which is caring about everybody else, you can't do it if you have spent, right? So I'm so glad you lifted that up. So again, I have to balance my emotions in recognizing the isms so that I won't allow myself to be sacrificed at the altar of let's work together and it not being reciprocated, like Dylan was saying, right? But then what are some moments of solidarity that stick out to you where, okay, there were some coalitions on whatever initiative or what have you? And also too, Dylan, and you all, I keep going to Dylan on advocacy stuff because of the long history. But all of you have done work in advocacy. Remember the one Baton Rouge a while back? I mean, did we ever rectify that? And then I was talking with some friends of mine maybe 2-3 years ago. And when I looked at the language that was so rejected at the time when it was the One Baton Rouge initiative, it was the acknowledge, right? And I haven't looked at the language in a while, but that's what stuck out to me was just folks didn't want to officially recognize. Well, I'll be nice to you, but I don't want to recognize. I'm like, how can you? But how powerful it is just to be recognized officially as a worthy human being, as a person with equal rights, regardless of your sexual gender or orientation, your gender or sexual orientation. And so then, did anybody have any insight on the more current, I'm sorry, Tia had mentioned the resolutions in the city parish government, but I know maybe 3 years ago, because Progressive Social Network and others were working in coalition on something similar, and then there was like some pushback at the last minute. I don't know what, I apologize, but I don't know what happened after that.
Yeah, so there was going to be an ordinance to have local protections for LGBTQ people from discrimination. And my understanding is that, right at the very end, there were a couple of council members who had maybe said they were going to vote for it, who turned around and said, instead, we want to put forward this alternative resolution that says we want to wait for the Supreme Court to say whether these rights exist, right? Which is totally, that's like actually the opposite of saying we want you to have equal rights, right? That's like saying we'll follow the law if we have to. And so it never ended up happening. So the mayor's office, when Mayor President Sharon Westenbrun was first elected, she put out for city government, right, protections just like Mayor Kip Holden had. But we still don't have private protections in private businesses in Baton Rouge. Now that said, the Supreme Court did affirm those rights. So anybody who's watching who is not clear on this, like, if you are discriminated against based on your sexual orientation or gender identity, that is illegal, whether there's a city ordinance or not. And so, if that happens, get in touch with one of the groups that is working on these issues, because we can refer you to where you can file a complaint, because that is totally illegal. But that said, no, city government hasn't moved on it.
Okay, thank you. And Tia, looked like you wanted to say something.
No, I was just in agreement to what Dylan was saying.
Okay. And then any moments, I actually digressed on my own question. I'm so silly. Okay, because I lifted up solidarity moments. Well, in PSN, that was a collaborative effort. And I'm mentioning PSN because folks in PSN talked to me about it at the time. But I know there were others involved with that. And so then any other moments of solidarity, I know when I used to do a lot of work at the state capitol, I know there was a lot of solidarity around pay equity for women. And then some of those same women would turn around, not all, because unfortunately, folks can work together sometimes on certain things and they just can't wrap their head around working on other things together. But some of the ladies that worked on pay equity also turn around and work on LGBTQ plus issues at the state capitol. And so I've been blessed to be a part of that type of solidarity. Anybody else?
Yeah, so that still exists, that partnership, which is great. And I think the other thing I'll flag this past year was, we had a trans lobby day on the same day that the House committee was hearing the bill on decriminalizing sex work, which was fantastic because there were huge coalitions around both of those issues. And so we were able to get together early in the morning and basically trade cards, right? We gave them a whole bunch of red cards to fill out in opposition to the anti-trans bill. They gave us a whole bunch of green cards to fill out in support of decriminalizing sex work. And obviously those issues overlap hugely because of the amount of sex work being really prevalent in the trans community, because we're pushed into the survival economy because of discrimination, right? But it was great to sort of see those two giant groups sort of come together and say, we're here in the same space. We're obviously going to figure out how to help each other in this moment.
Thanks for sharing. Tia, you was about to pop in.
I'm still shaking my head into agreement with him. It's still listening.
Okay. And did you have any personal moments, personal instances that just really stick out to you about different groups that you've worked with coming together that generally operate in their own spaces but have come together on particular things?
There's so many that I can't name. A lot of the work that we do is not always highlighted in the community. Our agency that we're joining forces with different agencies every day to get care services to people in depending on what they need. So with working with Capital Area Reentry Program, as well as being the co-chair with Get Loud Louisiana, a lot of the initiatives that we do is based off support and allies from different regions, just not those here in Region 2. I have some connects in Region 9 that have been ultimately great pools of resources for me. It's a challenge to have a fight that there are so many intersections. Ultimately, right now, we're facing, me personally, is fighting for ending the epidemic against HIV and AIDS. But underneath that is that subculture of the LGBTQ. And then of the LGBTQ is of those African American identify as gay or men that are having, I say to be a part of the community in which I serve, I have everyday heroes that are doing their work just as you to pull a panel together out of not only out of respect for pride, because your work has been, just hearing Dylan say how far the history goes, to me, shows me and tells me that you are a person that cares about everybody and you are trying to bridge that gap. So I'm going to say a moment of solidarity is being able to be on this panel with you and listen and get more information from everybody that's involved. So
thanks. Dr. Paul.
Yeah, I like to highlight two moments for me. I'm gonna carefully try not to name too many names, but the bar that was recognized the week before Provo's, Cedarcrest bar, the long-running bar downtown, they were very supportive of me doing the dissertation, allowing me to survey people there. And I've noticed that even though by and large their customer base is usually white gay men, on occasion it's white lesbian women, but usually white gay men, they are quite receptive to doing anything that any part of the community needs. If it's a way that they can support, they are generally pretty open to supporting. Because not only have I been there, but I've seen other organizations do testing sites there. I've seen other organizations do other kinds of things there. And that is something that I can say without a doubt. And the other thing that I was very happy about with my local Baton Rouge, particularly queer community, was after our great floods here in 2016. Puerto Rico was hit with Hurricane Maria in 2017. And as a community service, outreach, disaster relief help, I was collecting a lot of things and taking them to Puerto Rico. And one of the things that I wanted to take was condoms, because a lot of times in disasters, people, they send water or they send diapers, but they never really think about sexual health. But again, we're humans. And, if you don't have power and you don't have nothing to do or gas or anywhere to, eventually you go find something to do with your time. So I had several organizations give me thousands upon thousands of condoms to take, like from the Louisiana Department of Health to and a few local organizations too. And they were like, yeah, we know we're just recovering from catching it, but they're really catching it. And so, yeah, if you're going to get it to them, that'll be great. So here you go, 2,000 condoms.
Wow.
And it was a real just aha moment, and a moment of gratitude, and a moment of recognition of at least what Louisiana can be, because we were literally definitely half the parish was like not really in their house, or like if they were in their house, like, it was gutted and they were in a tent or in one of those ATVs that people were doing. And they were still like, but we'll still give. And so, there is hope. We can work together. We can find our humanity and find a common good and all work towards it. But it can be challenging.
Yeah. And it, like the bottom line is, if like dealing with the isms, if folks could just figure out how not to be selfish, period. Can we figure out as individuals, and then it will just, permeate the atmosphere on how not to be selfish. So I'm Black female. If I operate in this is my favorite thing to say during board meetings and board retreats. If we just operate in love, then operating in different spaces wouldn't be so hard at all, but so I just want to thank you all for joining me. This was very, very nice. We don't have any questions in the live stream to my knowledge. Well, let me check one more spot just to double check. I've been looking in one space. But what I want to do is, you all are part of some amazing organizations, and I know there's at least somebody watching that probably will want to get in touch with you all. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tag y'all in the comments of the live stream, and that way anybody that watches after can see, oh, okay, that's so and so, and let me, they can just hit you up direct on Facebook if y'all don't mind.
Sounds good.
Okay, amazing. And so then I will just close out. I hope a future moment of solidarity will be on sex education, period, because just like Dr. Paul Winfield, the baby of W.T. Winfield, that's W.T.'s baby, y'all, has stated time and time again that people gonna, some of the same people that want to pass out and pretend like nothing is happening are the same ones that's struggling. I'm not struggling, that's not even the best way to describe it, but some of the same folks that are pushing against comprehensive sex education for all people, pushing against LGBTQ plus rights, you know, in their family or in their own personal experience, they were, you know, it's not like they were celibate till they got married, you know. And it's because they're human beings with normal sex drives. And yes, people should be very responsible because sex is actually a huge responsibility, not just something fun to do or to be fruitful and multiply. It's a responsibility attached to it. And we can't expect folks to be responsible and make good decisions and not get pregnant uh, early, you know, in high school or middle school, even if they don't even have opportunities to learn about how to be responsible with it. Being responsible and educating folks is not condoning those things you feel are detrimental to folks. Is helping them make better decisions. So I look forward, hope, you know, to some solidarity on some of those initiatives. And again, to those who may have joined late, this is part of Madam Vice President of East Baton Rouge School Board's Culture and Diversity Initiative. We are in some tumultuous times right now. It's causing people to be more divided than we've been in some time. And especially when you look at the politics, personally, I'm concerned that it's going to get even worse, which is hard to imagine. But this is my little contribution. If we become more aware of each other and get out of our bubbles, then it's and see people as human beings. And part of seeing people as human beings is being educated on their experiences. Then it makes it that much harder for us to operate in hate and discriminate against one another. And so that's what this roundtable series is about this year. And so I appreciate you all, my two older friends, Dylan and Paul, and then my new friend, Tia, and also constituent of School Board District 4. Thank you all. Did anybody have anything they want to say in closing, or are y'all good? I like to just open it up if anybody wants to say anything, not a requirement or anything. All right. Well,
Just thank you.
For sure. And thank you. And, you know, again, thank you all each for taking time out of your busy Saturdays. Because all of us on here are very busy people. I actually have a meeting waiting on me now.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you so much, and happy Pride, everyone.
Yes, happy Pride.
Happy Pride, and thank you all. Talk to you all soon.
Okay, thank you.